and he married his wife Purnamasi Mataji, who is also a disciple of Srila Prabhupada, in 1977. He has done a vast array of service in many different temples. Currently, he serves on the board of directors of Iskcon Toronto, as well as Stouffville, Oakville, Ottawa, and the newly incorporated Iskcon Durham. He has also served along with the GBC deputies, and is currently a member of the assessment of the Sannyas Candidates Committee. So we would like to warmly welcome Krishna Kaviraj Prabhu today for a spiritual discourse. Today, Prabhu has picked a very unique topic about AI. Is it a friend or foe? So I know we all deal with AI in our day-to-day lives in some way, shape, or form. So we're going to hear about it in a spiritual context today.
Chant Jai Radha Madhava, which Srila Prabhupada did always for speaking transcendental subject matters. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Thank you all for being here today. I know that some of you have made sacrifices to get here. I was just talking to somebody the other day who actually first went to the temple just because they really needed a meal. I mean, in the old days that happened a lot, back in the hippie days, which was a long time ago. Oftentimes people would come to the temple because they just had nothing to eat. And so we would feed them. And sometimes in those days we didn't have such strict rules about who could be in the temple and who couldn't. Now we have to do background checks on everybody to make sure that you'll be secure. But back in those days, it's just like you showed up at the door, you wanted a meal, come on in. And then, you want to stay overnight? Great, but you got to chant 16 rounds the next morning, and I'm going to put a dhoti on you. Sometimes within a day or two, these people were shaved up and chanting. Some of them stayed, and some of them didn't. But it was a very exciting time in Krishna consciousness. So now we have an exciting time in the material world, wouldn't you say? There's a lot of things going on that are troubling. And there is something that was actually co-discovered by a professor at the University of Toronto. And he co-discovered the algorithms for artificial intelligence. I mean, it's pretty amazing that he was able to figure this out. It took a long time, and there were different issues that these professors and great thinkers, mathematicians had to figure out in order to get a computer to actually start to learn. These computers can actually learn, which is a little scary, you might think, but they can only learn what they're given, so whatever they're exposed to. So it's not in the same way that we are human beings, we learn also. But we learn at every moment, just from everything that's going on around us. We learn how cold it is, or how warm it is, or how light it is, or how dark it is, and we make adjustments accordingly. And so we're constantly utilizing our material intelligence to make adjustments for our sense gratification. And as we know, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, there are 8 material elements, Bhumir, Apo, Nalo, Vayu, and then the mind, the intelligence. So Bhumir is earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and then false ego. So these are all the 5 from ether on down are called the gross material elements. And then the mind, the intelligence, and the false ego are considered the subtle material elements because they're not apparent to the senses. You can't see the mind, you can't touch the intelligence, and nobody even has a clue what false ego is. But false ego is that material element which actually makes us think that we are these material elements. It's the first material element that covers the conditioned soul. So when being in the spiritual sky, we were with Krishna and we decided, wait a minute, Krishna's getting all the attention. I want to get the attention. Therefore, I am going to turn my back on Krishna. And as soon as we turn our back on Krishna, what happens? We are completely absorbed in the material nature. And the first covering of that is false ego. We start to think, I am this body. And the first body that we take when we come into the material world is actually the body of a Lord Brahma. There are many, many universes. And many of you know the story of Lord Brahma of this universe, but there are also Lord Brahmas in many other universes. Our Lord Brahma in this universe has 4 heads. It's a very small universe, actually, this one, compared to some of the other universes where there's Brahmas that have 100 heads, 1,000 heads, 10,000 heads, even 100,000 or more heads. And so because they have such big universes. Because they're in charge of putting the conditioned souls into material bodies. So it's quite a job, and so it requires a lot of intelligence. So when we are in the material world, we are misusing our intelligence. We are using our intelligence. Our mind is just above the senses, right? And so whenever the senses are seeing or smelling or tasting, the mind either becomes attracted to that or disgusted with it. So it's accepting or rejecting. That is the function of the mind. The mind just accepts things. Yeah, this is great, I love it. Or no, I hate it. But the intelligence is above that. And the intelligence is where we gather knowledge, and we have the ability to utilize that knowledge. Now, in the material world, some people utilize that knowledge that they get for very bad things, right? We have people who rob banks and, do so many terrible things, or they make casinos where you can never win. If you go to a casino, you're always going to lose. I mean, you may win for a little while. And a lot of times they know who's a new person at the casino, and they can actually arrange it so that you start to win. Because by that winning, the mind goes, whoa, I like this. I'm getting rich, and all of a sudden you get really attached to it, and you can actually become addicted. Because it is such a adrenaline rush when you win, right? So it becomes a very addictive thing, and some people become so addicted to gambling that they lose everything. I remember I was working at the Aurelia Hospital when the Rama Casino first opened. And just after it opened, we started seeing almost every week, we saw one suicide attempt of somebody who had gone to the casino and lost everything. Like everything. They lost their house, they lost their car, they lost everything. And they just went out and tried to commit suicide, and they ended up in the hospital. So in this way, sometimes people misuse their intelligence. And it's interesting that the professor who developed artificial intelligence, he himself realized that, yeah, there's a lot of good that can be had from artificial intelligence. The only problem is there are not that many good people in the world. And there are so many ways in which you can misuse artificial intelligence to really hurt a lot of people and do, perform scams, phone scams and all kinds of things, and just rip people off. And he saw that it was such a danger that he actually, just after he published it, he said, actually, I realize now that this is a horrible thing. And I wish that I'd never found it, because it's not going to go well for the world. I mean, now we can't even tell what we're seeing, and now we're having an election in Canada. You can't tell if the person that is actually speaking the candidate that is speaking is actually saying that, because it can be easily mimicked by artificial intelligence. And it looks real. It looks like, yeah, they're actually saying it, but they're not. So the Kali Yuga is, one of the traits of Kali Yuga is that it loses all good qualities, and the four pillars of religiosity, truthfulness, austerity, mercy, and cleanliness, become degraded in the age of Kali. And in fact, we know the story of Maharaj Parikshit when he came upon the bull that had been tortured by the personality of Kali, because Krishna had just left the planet, and so the personality of Kali now became dominant on the planet. And what did he do? One of the first things he did was he started torturing a bull. The symbol of Dharma. The bull is the symbol of Dharma. And what did he do? He started chopping its legs off. And it's described that also in the Bhagavatam that these four legs are truthfulness, austerity, mercy, and cleanliness. And 3 of the legs had been chopped off before Maharaj Parikshit arrived on the scene and saw Kali doing this. And he immediately took out his sword and he said, "I'm going to kill you for doing what you did to that bull." And the personality of Kali immediately surrendered to Maharaj Parikshit. And when a Kshatriya, even though that person had done something really horrendous, when somebody surrenders, then the Kshatriya has to say, "Okay, I will also protect you in some way." So he said, "You've already destroyed the 3 legs, but the leg of truthfulness must stay." And so the personality of Kali said, "All right." And then he also told the personality of Kali that you can go and you can stay where there is intoxication, prostitution, and gambling. And those are the places where you can go and have some shelter. So that was the beginning of Kali Yuga and the beginning of the degradation of humanity. But prior to 5,000 years ago, when it was not Kali Yuga, it was actually Treta Yuga. So prior to that, people had all good qualities. Nobody lied, nobody cheated, everybody was faithful, truthful, clean, austere, and everybody worked together. Nobody tried to lord it over anybody else. Like even the Varnashram system, on which the caste system kind of degraded out of, where the Brahmins are the spiritual teachers of society, and then the Kshatriyas are the protectors. Shat means to protect. And so they were the protectors, and then the Vaishyas, they were the mercantile class. They developed all the Lakshmi and everything to keep all the other levels of society with good commerce, and so that people could be fed and housed and everything else. And then the Sudras served and made sure everything happened. But the Brahmins at that time never felt that I was above the Sudras, because they all felt that they were part of this transcendental body. Varnashrama Vibhagasaha, actually Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that Varnashram Vibhagasaha is created by me. So, Daiviyesha Gunamai, no, that's a different verse. Anyway, the Varnashram is created by Krishna. And so in this way, they all felt that they were part of that transcendental body. And so they felt that the head is just as valuable as the legs. If I said, "Oh, you have a good head, we'll just cut off your legs." Would you be happy with that? No, nobody would be happy with that. The legs are necessary. And, would somebody want to give up their stomach or their arms? No. They're all important parts of the whole system. And so that whole system worked together perfectly. So it was This way, nobody was interested in just sense gratification. Now we see everybody everywhere in the world that people are only interested in satisfying their senses. There is no understanding of austerity anymore. It used to be that sages who were austere, the Brahmins even, they would go often from house to house, and they would sometimes beg. And of course, when they would go to beg at a house, the householder would say, "Oh, please come in." And they would feed the Brahmin, and then the Brahmin would give them some transcendental knowledge, and then they would give some dakshin to the Brahmin, and he would go on his way. And in this way, austerity was respected. Nowadays, if somebody comes begging at the door, oftentimes it's just wham on the door. You knock on the door. "Hi, we're here to give you a book on transcendental knowledge." Slam. I mean, it doesn't happen a lot of times. We see a lot. The devotees are going out door to door, and they're meeting a lot of wonderful people who are just waiting for that transcendental knowledge. But still, there are many people who are not. There are some ripened fruit and some unripened fruit. But getting back to, so the intelligence of society needs to be directed towards getting away from sense gratification and actually thinking that all of society should collectively start thinking about what are we here for? Are we here just to get as much money, wealth, power, homes, cars? Is that all we're here for? Or is there something else to human life? And of course, there's a lot more to human life. If we actually understand that we are spirit souls and that we have an eternal relationship with Krishna, then we can become truly happy. And we can actually become detached from the senses to the point where years ago when Srila Prabhupada came to Toronto, he had a very sore tooth. And it was on Sunday, and the devotees had been seeing that Prabhupada had been, and he had actually a swelling in his mouth. There's pictures where you can see a swelling in Prabhupada's mouth. But Prabhupada kept doing everything that he normally did. He really wasn't disturbed. But the devotees could see that it must be hurting. And the devotees said to Srila Prabhupada, and Hari Sori Prabhu, who was a friend of mine, he was here with Prabhupada. And he told him and Satsvarup was also here. And Satsvarup and Hari Sari both said to Prabhupada, "Prabhupada, you shouldn't go down for the Sunday Feast lecture. Let one of the senior devotees give the lecture, and then you can just rest and make sure that this gets better." And Prabhupada said, "No, I have come to give this message, and so I must go." And actually on that day, back in those days we didn't have big crowds coming to the temple. Often on a Sunday, if we got 100 people, we would consider that was a big crowd. But on that Sunday feast, there were probably about 200, 250 people. So it was much bigger than we normally get. And there were a lot of Indian people, and Srila Prabhupada gave a very good lecture about Krishna consciousness and about how the Indian, it is actually Bharata Brahmite Muma Janma. If you've taken birth in the land of Bharata, Lord Chaitanya says, if you've taken birth in the land of Bharata, then you should actually be one who goes and tells others about Krishna and gives that transcendental knowledge, and especially spread the Sankirtan of the holy name, the Hare Krishna mantra. And Prabhupada spoke that very strongly, very distinctly. So Prabhupada was giving that to try to encourage more people to spread Krishna consciousness as we do here every day, and we encourage you on Sundays many different ways in our talks and everything. We encourage you to become involved in spreading Krishna consciousness, giving Krishna consciousness to others. Because when you give Krishna consciousness to others, your own Krishna consciousness grows. Prabhupada always did that. One time there was this thing about women back in the 60s. It was some scientist that said that women have brains that don't weigh as much as men's brains. And Prabhupada said, but when they join Krishna consciousness, their brain grows. And Prabhupada had these big eyes. So, in this way, Prabhupada was encouraging everybody. But what happens with artificial intelligence, one of the things that they've found now, they're doing all kinds of studies even already on the effect of artificial intelligence, and they're realizing that some people are becoming dependent on artificial intelligence. In other words, they're not using their own intelligence, they're just, and students are using it to even write papers, and not, they don't even critique what AI has given them. They'll just ask AI to write me a paper on Shakespeare, give me 16 pages on Shakespeare's, King Lear or something like that. And the AI will write it all out and they'll just hand it in. Of course, now they have software that can detect whether it was written by AI or by an actual person. But what's happening is they found that those who just depend on AI, just like doctors also, there's in the medical profession now, a lot of times, and especially I know there's a lot of nurse practitioners because we have a shortage of doctors, there's a lot of nurse practitioners, and they are actually typing in symptoms. A lot of times if you're going to talk to a nurse practitioner, they're typing in your symptoms as you're saying them, and then the AI spits out a possible diagnosis. Now, if the person using AI actually questions what comes out and looks at it and goes, this does fit in this way, but this can be changed, or this needs to be changed like that, or is not accurate in some way, then they found that actually, in that sense, AI can actually help somebody to become a little bit more intelligent and do things properly. But if somebody just takes what the AI spits out and gives it to somebody else without questioning, that's when the person doing that on a constant basis, their intelligence quotient actually starts to go down. They can actually lose points on their IQ. So it's a very weird thing, but AI has, just like anything in the material world. Srila Prabhupada, I just listened today to a little thing where Prabhupada talks about a devotee does not hate anything. Because we see that everything is Krishna's and everything should be utilized in the service of Krishna, we have no hate for anything. We love everybody. We love Muslims and Jews and Palestinians and Russians and Ukrainians and whoever. and we love dogs and cats and spiders and, whatever. Like a lot of times people go, well, I like, this fuzzy caterpillar, but I hate spiders. But no, actually they're both spirit souls. And they just have a different covering. It's not their fault. So why should we hate? Why should we have this hate and this dislike? But now in the material world, what's happening? There's so much hate in the world today. And we can see that war is increasing. We're getting closer and closer. That they have this doomsday clock. I don't know if anybody remembers, but back in the 60s when they first started realizing that the nuclear weapons could be utilized, and that would be doomsday. If somebody launched the nuclear weapons and the other countries launched, it could wipe out the entire Earth, practically. There might be a few odd survivors, especially cockroaches. Apparently they can survive anything. But it would be the end of existence. It would be apocalyptic. So they devised this doomsday clock where they said that as long as we're, 10 minutes from midnight, midnight was when somebody was going to push the button. They said, we're okay. And so in the early 60s, 1960, 61, 62, we were at about 10 minutes to midnight. But when the Cuban crisis happened, does anybody know about the Cuban crisis? When the Cuban crisis happened, what happened? The Russians were trying to put nuclear weapons in Cuba so that they would get first strike, because their warheads would be very close to the United States. And the United States blocked off Cuba with their ships and did not allow the ships to get by. And it almost, it was said that, because the Russians were saying, if you don't let us through, then we're going to push the button. And the doomsday clock suddenly went from about 10 to midnight to about 30 seconds to midnight. And I can remember in those days, we used to have air raid sirens all over the place. And they would have these drills where the air raid siren would go off in our town. And if you were at school, you had to hide under your desk. Not that hiding under your desk is going to help you if a nuclear bomb goes off, but somehow or other they thought it might help. But in this way, the planet is just going nuts, because now they figure we're at like 5 seconds to midnight. That's how bad things have gotten in the world. And it's because people want sense gratification. And especially some of the big leaders, all they want is sense gratification. They don't want to help people. They're not concerned. They're just thinking, as long as I survive, so if I have my big bunker where I can go and I can survive this nuclear war, then I'll be okay. It doesn't matter if everybody else dies. That's what they're thinking. They're not leaders. They're not kshatriyas. They are cowards who are, destroying the entire population just for their own sense gratification. It's really a horrible situation. So they are misusing their intelligence. AI is something that can be misused, but it actually can also help spiritually sometimes. I've seen that devotees, even I was for a while, I served with the GBC. I was not a GBC, but I served at the GBC by helping screen proposals for the GBC. And we started noticing just in the last year that we could actually take a proposal and ask AI to either shorten it, pick out just the salient points or whatever. You can ask it to do certain, and it would often polish them up really well. So, in some ways, AI can really help. But it's still kind of a material thing. Is AI, is it real intelligence? Real intelligence, and Prabhupada talks in the Bhagavad Gita about what is spiritual intelligence. And there's a verse in the Bhagavad Gita, Vyavasayat Mikabodhir Hikeya Kurunandana Bahushakas Yanantascha Budayo Vyavasayanam. And one who has transcendental intelligence is fixed on the absolute truth and is thinking only of how I can go back to God and help others to come with me. But one whose intelligence is only there for helping the mind and all its material accepting and rejecting things, then their intelligence is bahushaka. It's many branched. So there's many branches because it has no focus. It's just like whatever sense gratification. And so that is the problem in the world today. We can utilize everything in the service of Krishna and stay focused, and we can even focus AI to help us to serve Krishna and to help others to become Krishna conscious. Or we can go down the route of sense gratification and take AI and just utilize it for our own satisfaction and end up destroying the world. So the choice is ours. Do you want to make the world a great place? A spiritual place? I mean, it's never going to be a perfectly spiritual place, but we can make it a better place where everybody is much happier because we're all serving Krishna together. And when everybody's serving Krishna together, then Krishna provides. When people are not serving Krishna, then Krishna takes away. So the choice is ours. Everybody here has a choice, and it begins with ourselves. So go home tonight, chant the Maha Mantra before you go to bed, and chant the Maha Mantra when you wake up in the morning. It's not a big thing, not a big deal. We're not asking you to shave your head, move into the temple, or even come out with us and distribute books. But if you just start to do that one thing, chant once in the morning and once in the evening, you'll find your life will change and the whole world will start to look better to you, and you'll be helping others, and they will start seeing, there's something about this person. I want to live like that person. So the choice is ours to make. Let us make the right choice on a day-to-day basis. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Thank you, Krishna Kaviraj, for that enlightening talk. So just to start with, in terms of upcoming events and observances, so this coming Thursday, the 24th of April, is Ekadasi. So we typically fast from grains and beans on this day, and the fasting is broken the following day between 6:18 and 10:56 a.m. And then in terms of festivals, we have a festival coming up early next month. Does anyone know what this festival is? Well, that's coming up soon, but not quite as soon as that. Yes, Nrsimha Chaturdasi. So Sunday, May 11th, we will be celebrating the Divine Appearance Day of Sri Nrsimha Dev. So Nrsimha Dev is like the protector of the devotees, and he is the form Krishna takes as a half man, half lion. So if you see on this pillar here, we have above Buddha, we have Sri Nrsimha Dev. So this is a very special form of the Lord that we will be honoring on this day. There will be lots of activities, so please stay tuned for more information.